Tennessee Health Department is hoping to shatter the stigmas surrounding the opioid crisis with a new campaign called the Tennessee Faces of the Opioid Crisis. The state launched the effort in mid-July, and it's to help put a face on the crisis and the epidemic that we're facing in the state. And joining me today with more about it is Tennessee Health Department spokesperson Elizabeth Hart. Thanks for joining us. And then one of the Tennesseans featured in the campaign, that's April Barnes. Both ladies, thank you so much for coming here today.
Thanks for having us.
So Elizabeth, please start us off. How did the idea for the campaign come about?
So we've all heard all the news stories about the opioid crisis, not only here in Tennessee, but across the country. And an opportunity became available through the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention for us to apply for some grant funding. And as we were thinking about what that was going to be, we thought, let's make it personal. Let's meet people like April in Tennessee and have them tell their stories so that others can learn what the opioid crisis looks like here in the state.
And how did citizens get chosen for this, obviously like April did and others?
So we did some outreach to some of our anti-drug coalitions across the state, but also to the local health departments. The Tennessee Department of Health is in every single county, all 95 counties here in the state. And so we just really did some legwork and made some phone calls, sent some emails, contacted folks on social media, heard about their stories, and thought they would be a great person to represent their county. Some of the counties have multiple people, which is great. Some of the larger counties do. We've been speaking to everyone from law enforcement to faith leaders to educators to individuals who are themselves in recovery, but also individuals who have family members who are in recovery. And unfortunately, we do have a few who have lost loved ones. And so we've been talking with them as well.
And that's really a good point about how this has obviously there's no, economic limit or anything that this is, this epidemic is affecting everyone.
That's correct.
So what has the reaction been? You've probably had a wide variety of people
reacting.
So
we have such diversity with our stories. Everyone from Black to white, Hispanic, Native American, from all socioeconomic backgrounds. As a government worker, I have been in homes that I'm sure I will never be able to afford. I've been in churches, I've been in office buildings, I've been to cemeteries, I've been to parks. Again, this was about telling the stories, their stories of how their lives have been impacted by the crisis. The feedback has been amazing. We've had several thousand every week that have come to our website, tnfacesofopioids.com, and individuals who hear their stories of the folks in their communities wanting to then submit their stories. So that's how we've been receiving multiple stories from certain counties.
Great. Now, how can people, obviously it's on social media, right, and the website, how can people learn about the campaign?
So we encourage people to go to tnfacesofopioids.com, but also if you are on social media, we are on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, #TNFaces. We actually created an Instagram specifically for this campaign, which is TN Faces, and every single day, every other day sometimes, we do post the stories, such as April's. April actually was our very first story that we posted in mid-July, and she received a lot of likes and love on social media platforms. But people are encouraged to go to that website and upload their story, and then we'll be in contact with them and come to their homes and to their offices and wherever to take their photo and to share their story on the website with the rest of the Tennessean folks in the state.
So that's a really personal thing to share a story like that. And I know what April will hear yours in a little bit. But what's it been like kind of seeing just a wide variety of people sharing their really a lot of pain probably, and then a lot of triumph too, overcoming?
So this has become very personal for me. April and I have actually become friends because of it. I feel like I have 95 new friends, both on Facebook and in real life. This is very personal because these are their stories, these are their lives. And I not only but the entire team want to be very sensitive to that. So when they do submit their stories, I don't edit them. I want it to be in their voice. I do look for grammar and spelling and those kinds of things, right? But we want it to be in their language. And so if they use slang language, we included the slang language. It's been hurtful sometimes, I think, and painful. I've sat with individuals and we've cried. I don't wear makeup usually when I go to people and take their photo and listen to their story because there's no telling what could happen. I've sat and held folks' hands as they told their story, but we've also laughed and smiled. You mentioned the triumph. I've spoken with individuals who have been in recovery for a few months. My highest one is, her name is Michelle, and she is in Knoxville, and she is such a delight. She is celebrating 23 years of sobriety, and it is truly an amazing story of triumph of what she has done, not only for herself, but in her community in Knoxville.
Amazing stuff, Elizabeth. Hopefully people who can see this and see the campaign can, maybe reach out for help and get what they need.
Absolutely. And on the website, I'm glad that you mentioned that, there are resources for individuals to get help. So while the focus of the website and the campaign are telling the stories of people like April, we also want them to know that there is information on the website. Eventually, we're going to go into a next phase with the website with a calendar of events so that there are NA, Narcotics Anonymous meetings, or any other kind of recovery events that are happening in their community. We will eventually be adding those as well. So again, there's lots of resources on there, but we encourage people to read the stories because there's some amazing stories of triumph, along with some that are unfortunate sadness, but even the ones that have lost loved ones. I think about a woman in Memphis, in Shelby County, Mimi. She took the loss of her son and turned it into a nonprofit. And so now she's giving back in the name of her son, telling people about the resources that are available, but also to make sure that another parent does not go through what she went through.
Great. Yeah, that's a wonderful example too, and that kind of ties in with April. With you, you saw. We'll talk more about your situation. You grew up dealing with situation with your parents, right? Mm-hmm. Where you had faced something like that. Can you kind of give us a little bit of the background that you've gone through in your firsthand dealings with opioids?
Yeah. So I ended up transitioning and living in foster care due to the drug addiction that both of my parents had, both dependent and addicted to opioids specifically. My father passed away of an opioid overdose, and at that point my mother's addiction really spiraled out of control. Just the grief and the loss coupled with the addiction that she already had and was facing at that time. And so for years she struggled, and she went back and forth in and out of treatment, incarceration. I was in foster care during that time, and it wasn't until 2006 that she had her first real length of sobriety and recovery, and that was through going through a program called The Next Door. I currently work there now, which is pretty amazing to be able to be on this side of things and get to experience women every day when they're ready for that. They have that willingness and that readiness for change. But that was my experience, is growing up with a mother who struggled and that I knew wanted a different life, that it wasn't a moral failing and it wasn't a choice or willpower or lack of. It truly was a disease that she needed help from, and she needed treatment. So.
Right, and so you see it as part of it now that you're helping others too. You're seeing that same kind of that desire to change something. So how do you help people get that moving forward happening? Yeah,
so it starts first with their willingness. Obviously, there has to be some motivation to have a different life. However, I think education is really important about what is happening and what happens to the brain and the science behind addiction. That way families and loved ones or even professionals, we need to understand what is happening so we can have compassion and give people the help that they need. It's a very scary and fragile moment when they are seeking treatment. The ambivalence is there even when they're walking in the door of I've had this life and I've had this to cope with whatever pain that they're trying to medicate. And so it just takes a really compassionate approach, and I think that through education, prevention efforts, hopefully this campaign will do that as well, just preventing before that it even gets to that step. But yeah, it's a really brave step that people have to take to make that change.
And it really is. It takes a lot of soul searching, probably. Mm-hmm. And you've probably, as Elizabeth has seen, you see people from all walks of life who come in your doors, right?
Absolutely, yes. And people that are coming from homelessness, incarceration, domestic violence, sex trafficking, or a CEO of a company. So it really doesn't discriminate. So you can have what people call a functioning addiction, or they're going to work and they're doing everything in their daily life and no one knows. That doesn't mean that they they need a different course of treatment. They're just as enslaved by that addiction as someone else who's lost everything. Their lives just look different on the outside. So,
right, and I think that's where a lot of this, where people seem to think, oh, well, there's a certain, and I hate to use the word junkie, look to people, and you know that's not true at all. That people can be hiding it really well, and they just, just reach that point. How did you know that you were like, okay, when you saw what your mom went through, you went through some rough times yourself. How did you know you were like, okay, I've had enough, I'm ready to make that change?
Well, so my personal story of recovery and what led me to treatment may not have been opioids, but it was other life-controlling behaviors, and I definitely was using substances. I started using substances at age 11 in foster care, and found respite and relief in anything that was mind-altering. And so for me, I struggled off and on for years with whether it was addiction to alcohol or amphetamines or whatever it was that was mood altering or mind altering. It wasn't until I actually had some trauma start to resurface that had been suppressed that I was having flashbacks and some PTSD, and really just got to this point of suicidal, hopelessness, just suicidal thoughts, and I felt like the light within me that I always had was just out. It was gone, and that's what really took me to this place. That gift, just desperation, is that's what that was for me. Is that I thought, I don't know myself anymore. I can't look in the mirror and recognize this person, and I have no desire to live, which was really scary for me. And so I went to treatment, and I did a lot of trauma work, which I think is really important for people to understand mental health and trauma and how that correlates, and how that is oftentimes so much a foundation of the addiction. There's some sort of root of pain, whether that's grief or loss or trauma, that also has to be dealt with.
Right, so. And then the steps that people go through. Say someone who might be listening to this now, and again, in case you're just tuning in, this is WAPX-FM 91.9, and I'm Micah Terrell with the Public Affairs here. We're talking about the Faces of the Opioid Awareness campaign that the Tennessee Health Department's putting on. How can people, if they're just tuning in, what can they do to reach out to you at the next door?
Yeah, so my contact information, I can provide that. Someone can send me an email. My email is april.barnes@thenextdoor.org, or they can call me on my cell phone. It's on my business card. It's obviously on the internet because I get calls all the time from people that say, I found your number on the internet. And that number is 615-414-0741. I'm pretty easy to reach, so.
Right, and in case they are looking at the actual campaign on the social media, on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, the information's there as well. And what's the website again, Elizabeth?
And correct, that's tnfacesofopioids.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. But I also wanted to touch on something that you asked, April, and you said that the look of someone who potentially is an addict. And I can tell you that one of the things that I've found traveling the highways and the byways of the state of Tennessee is there is no look. The different stories that I've heard from individuals who've had trauma as children. There's one young woman that I know was sexually assaulted, and her story is on the website, and she was using it at a very young age, but you wouldn't be able to tell it now. And so that's one of the things that we want to get across to folks, is that there really is not one particular face. When we decided to start this campaign, again, it's at tnfacesofopioids.com. We initially thought we were going to put everybody in front of backdrops, and so everyone would have the same backdrop. So one of our chief medical officer, who has since retired, Dr. David Reagan, Dr. Reagan had the suggestion and said, no, you need to get on the car and drive around to the state, because no one's story is the same. Therefore, their background of their photo shouldn't be the same. Okay. So if you go on the website and look at every single photo, there's not one that looks exactly alike. So that's the personal side of this campaign, and we hope that by doing this, we reduce the stigma of what people think are what opioid addicts look like, or what the addiction looks like. So this is all part of the process with the campaign. And again, we welcome anyone to submit their story or call us or contact me, and that's at tnfacesofopioids.com.
Great. And again, as we've mentioned, it's a serious problem that we all need to take care of and everything. Thank you so much for stopping by. Elizabeth Hart with the Tennessee Health Department of Health and April Barnes with Next Door. Thank you so much for sharing, and we appreciate this. And I'm Micah Terrell with 91.9 Public Affairs.